Imagine walking down any American street on a Sunday afternoon in 1932. Through every window drifted aromas that made your mouth water, rich gravies, slow-roasted meats, and freshly baked pies. These weren't just meals. They were weekly celebrations that brought entire families together. But here's something that'll shock you, that fancy $65 roast you saw at Manhattan's St. Charles restaurant. That's actually recipe number 18 from our list, a dish that used to cost just 82 cents to feed an entire family. And wait until you hear how one clever grandmother's technique made it taste even better than today's version. Let's start with a dish that had butchers saving their best cuts for their favorite customers every single week. Classic pot roast Sunday. One piece of tough beef transformed into the most tender meat you've ever tasted. In 1932, when premium cuts cost a fortune, Mrs. Sarah Miller from Boston discovered something amazing, a secret technique that had the whole town talking. She'd tuck that pot roast into the oven at exactly 7 a.m., but wait until you hear what she did next. The magic wasn't just in the cooking time. Local butcher Tom Wilson started saving what he called the Sunday cut, especially for his regulars. It wasn't the most expensive piece, he'd say, but in the right hands, it tasted like a $5 roast. By 1933, he had a special list of customers who'd pick up their pot roast cuts every Saturday afternoon. Here's the incredible part. Women would gather at back porches, sharing tips like secret codes. One neighbor discovered that adding coffee grounds to the gravy made it taste like something from a fancy restaurant. That trick passed through 3 neighborhoods in a single month. Soon, every family had their own special twist, but they all started with Mrs. Miller's basic technique. And guess what? Today, that same recipe is making waves again. Speaking of transforming simple ingredients into something special, wait until you hear about our next recipe. A pork roast so impressive, it had guests taking pictures before Instagram even existed. Stuffed pork crown roast. When it came to Sunday dinner showstoppers, nothing turned heads like the crown roast. In 1935, butcher Frank O'Malley in Chicago's Meat District started something incredible. He didn't just sell pork, he taught customers a special preparation technique that turned ordinary meat into what looked like a crown fit for royalty. The trick? It wasn't the meat itself, but how you scored and shaped it. Local butcher shops started keeping what they called crown lists, special customers who'd order their roasts 2 weeks in advance. At $1.25, it cost more than regular pork. But as one customer said, the gasps when you bring it to the table are worth every penny. Now here's something wild. That same roast is selling for $89 at New York's top restaurants. They're using the exact same technique Frank taught his customers back in 1935, proving some recipes are truly timeless. Speaking of recipes that made people gasp, wait until you hear about a chicken dish that fooled even the pickiest Sunday dinner guests. Sunday Chicken Continental. This wasn't just chicken, it was a clever grandmother's secret that spread through 5 states faster than wildfire. Mrs. Rose Thompson from Ohio discovered that day-old bread, soaked in milk and seasoned just right, could transform an ordinary chicken into something fancy enough for company. The recipe first appeared in the St. Mary's Church cookbook in 1938, and what happened next was incredible. Women started calling from as far as Pennsylvania just to get a copy. Within months, it had spread through church circles in 5 different states, earning the nickname Company's Coming Chicken. And here's the best part. Top chefs are rediscovering this technique today. At Boston's Heritage Kitchen, they're serving a $32 version they call Grandmother's Sunday Best, though something tells me Mrs. Thompson would be shocked at that price tag. Now, speaking of clever cooking tricks, wait until you hear about a meatloaf that looked like stained glass when you sliced it. Cathedral Windows Meatloaf. Talk about turning simple ingredients into something magical. During the hardest years of the Depression, one Kansas mother created what the local paper called the most beautiful meatloaf in America. Her secret? She arranged carrots, green beans, and hard-boiled eggs in a pattern that, when sliced, looked like stunning stained glass windows. The Kansas City Star featured her recipe in 1933, and something incredible happened. Women started sending in photos of their own versions, each more beautiful than the last. One reader wrote, For the first time in months, my kids are excited about Meatloaf night. The real genius. Those colourful vegetables stretched 2 pounds of meat to feed 12 people. But it wasn't just about saving money. It was about making everyday dinners feel special. Today, food bloggers are bringing back this lost art. But if you think that's creative, just wait until you hear about how one Friday night tradition changed the way America thought about fish. Sunday fish fry. Back in 1930s, Milwaukee, Friday fish fries weren't just dinner. They were the highlight of the week. It all started with one parish cook's secret coating recipe. She mixed together common pantry ingredients, but the way she did it had people lining up around the block every Friday night. The tradition grew so big that local fish markets started taking Friday orders as early as Tuesday. By 1935, what started as a Catholic tradition had spread beyond church basements. Even non-Catholic families started showing up, drawn by the irresistible aroma and community spirit. Here's what's amazing: that same coating recipe is making waves today. Modern restaurants are charging $24 for what used to cost 35 cents a plate. One Milwaukee chef even won a regional cooking competition using his grandmother's old parish recipe. Now hold on to your aprons, because our next recipe shows how German immigrants turned a simple beef roll into something so special it had an entire neighborhood trading cooking times like precious secrets. Stuffed beef roll. Here's a dish that proves immigrants didn't just bring recipes, they brought pure culinary genius. In 1932, in Milwaukee's German district, Mrs. Emma Weber introduced a beef roll that changed Sunday dinners forever. She'd pound the meat paper thin, but that wasn't the clever part. Her filling technique had the whole neighborhood peeking through her kitchen window. The magic started when she shared her method at the local market. Soon, every housewife was rolling beef, like they'd done it for generations. They called it Weber's roll, even in the butcher shops where clerks would prepare the meat specially for this dish. One pounding technique spread through 3 neighborhoods in a single month. Today, that same recipe is causing a stir on wheels. Food trucks in 5 major cities are serving authentic German rolls for $15 a plate. Though something tells me Mrs. Weber would be amazed to see her humble Sunday supper selling out at food festivals. You might think that's impressive, but the next recipe revolutionized how America looked at dinner party presentations. Sunday ham with pineapple. The year was 1952, and Better Homes and Gardens magazine sparked a revolution with what they called the most beautiful ham in America. One homemaker's brilliant idea to add pineapple rings and cherries turned an ordinary ham into a centerpiece that looked like it belonged in a magazine, which it did right on the cover of their Easter issue. The secret wasn't just in the decoration, it was the glazing method. A mixture stirred together at exactly the right moment created a shine so perfect people thought it was professional. The recipe spread so fast that grocers started bundling pineapple rings with their holiday hams. These days, top chefs are giving this classic a modern spin. From Korean-style glazes to tropical fruit variations, that 1952 innovation is inspiring $40 entrees in fusion restaurants across the country. Let's journey to Pennsylvania Dutch country next, where one grandmother's dumpling technique became the talk of 3 counties: chicken and dumplings supreme. In the 1930s, Pennsylvania Dutch country, one bowl of chicken and dumplings changed how America thought about comfort food. Mrs. Sarah Yoder's dumplings didn't just sit in the broth, they floated like clouds. So light they dissolved the moment they touched your tongue. Her secret? A mixing technique that took 3 generations to perfect. Word spread through Lancaster County faster than Sunday gossip. The local general store started setting aside special flour just for dumpling making, calling it Yoder's Select. Women would trade butter for the chance to learn her technique. By 1935, her recipe appeared in so many church cookbooks, people started calling it the Lord's Dumplings. These days, restaurants can't get enough of this Pennsylvania Dutch magic. That same recipe, barely changed from Mrs. Yoda's original version, sells for $28 a bowl in Philadelphia's finest comfort food spots. Chefs spend months trying to recreate that legendary dumpling float. Here's a dish that turned backyard gardening into an art form: garden patch casserole. When Victory Gardens sprouted up during World War II, one Chicago mother turned vegetables into treasure. Martha Stevens didn't just grow vegetables, she transformed them into what the local paper called the rainbow casserole. Layer by layer, she arranged her garden harvest into patterns so beautiful, neighbors started planting their gardens just to copy her recipe. The genius wasn't just in the looks. Her layering method meant every bite had the perfect balance of flavors. Women started trading seeds based on her recipe requirements. Plant 2 rows of carrots, 3 of green beans, they'd say, planning their gardens around this one remarkable dish. Modern farm-to-table restaurants are bringing this wartime innovation back to life. At $32 a serving, they're calling it Heritage Garden Casserole. But old-timers recognize those careful layers from Victory Garden days. Let's peek into a Sunday night tradition that turned leftovers into something so special, even the pickiest eaters asked for seconds: Sunday night hash. Talk about turning nothing into something. In 1933, Depression-era mothers had a saying: Saturday's leftovers became Sunday night's treasure. One Kansas City cook, Mary Bennett, sparked a revolution when she discovered that pressing Sunday morning's potato scraps into a hot iron skillet created a crust so golden and crispy her family thought they were eating at a fancy restaurant. Her technique spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Soon, women were trading cast iron secrets over back fences. 20 minutes on medium heat, then flip it all at once, they'd whisper, sharing the tricks that turned simple leftovers into a feast. The local diner even started offering what they called Bennett's Special on their menu. Fast forward to today, and this humble hash is taking over brunch menus across America. At $18 a plate, upscale restaurants are recreating that same crispy bottom magic that Mary perfected with just a well-seasoned skillet and determination. The story of our next dish traveled from Italy to America in a grandmother's handwritten cookbook, Stuffed bell peppers. When Maria Russo stepped off the boat from Naples in 1931, she carried something more valuable than gold, a recipe that could feed a family of 6 with just 2 cups of rice and 4 peppers. In Boston's North End, she transformed garden peppers into meals so satisfying, even meat-loving husbands didn't miss their Sunday roast. Her secret, a rice-stretching method that made those peppers burst with flavor. She'd mix a handful of rice with garden herbs and just a touch of cheese, creating what neighbors called little green treasures. Soon, every family in the neighborhood was growing peppers in their backyard plots. Today, her recipe is finding new life in unexpected ways. Modern vegetarian restaurants are serving variations at $24 a plate, proving that Maria's clever combination of simple ingredients still has the power to amaze diners nearly a century later. Picture the next recipe as pure magic, a dish that turned tough beef tongue into something so tender, even picky eaters begged for seconds: Sunday beef tongue. In 1932, when expensive cuts of meat were just a dream, clever cooks turned what butchers couldn't sell into Sunday dinner gold. One Chicago butcher's wife, Helen Kowalski, discovered a preparation technique so remarkable people started requesting beef tongue instead of roast beef. Her secret, a 3-day process that transformed this humble cut into something that melted in your mouth. Words spread through the meat markets like wildfire. Soon, butchers were saving their best tongues for their most trusted customers. Ask for Helen's cut became the secret password that got you the perfect piece. By 1933, her method had spread to butcher shops in 3 different neighborhoods. Today, that same preparation technique is making waves in high-end restaurants. At $45 a plate, chefs are calling it heritage beef, but old-timers recognize Helen's method in every tender bite. Now let me share something that'll make you smile. A casserole so special, it earned a permanent spot at every 1940s dinner party. Company Casserole. This wasn't just any casserole, it was the dish that got you invited back. In 1942, Dorothy Mitchell from Minnesota created what Ladies' Home Journal called the casserole that launched 1,000 dinner parties. Her layering technique was so precise, women started drawing diagrams on their recipe cards. The magic wasn't just in the layers, it was how they melted together in the oven. Recipe cards became such hot commodities that women started trading them like baseball cards. One perfectly written card could get you 3 other dinner party recipes in return. Fast forward to today, and Dorothy's creation is taking social media by storm. Food bloggers are racking up millions of views with their versions, though at $22 for a single serving in trendy restaurants, it's a far cry from the budget-friendly dinner party star it used to be. Speaking of dishes that brought people together, let me tell you about a Hungarian grandmother's goulash that had an entire neighborhood learning to pronounce paprika correctly. Sunday night goulash. In 1934, Mrs. Anna Kovacs brought more than just her grandmother's goulash recipe from Budapest. She brought a cooking secret that changed how America thought about paprika. In her Cleveland kitchen, she showed neighbors that paprika wasn't just for color. 3 different kinds, she'd explain, mixing them together in what became known as Anna's blend. What started as a simple family recipe turned into the star of community potlucks. Women would arrive early just to watch her stir the pot, trying to catch the moment she added her secret spice combination. The local grocer started stocking Hungarian paprika just to keep up with demand. The Kovacs effect, he called it, as sales jumped from 1 tin a month to 20. These days, food trucks are giving Anna's recipe new life on wheels. From Seattle to Miami, authentic Hungarian goulash sells out at $16 a bowl, though nobody has quite matched Anna's legendary paprika blend. The next recipe proves that simple cabbage could become pure art in the right hands. Stuffed cabbage rolls. In Pittsburgh's bustling immigrant neighborhoods of 1935, one woman's cabbage rolls had people lining up around the block. Mrs. Eva Novak didn't just stuff cabbage, she transformed it. Her rolling technique was so precise, each roll looked like it came from a fancy restaurant instead of a humble kitchen. The magic spread through what they called cabbage roll universities, afternoon gatherings where Eva taught other women her technique. Not too tight, not too loose, she'd say, demonstrating the perfect roll. Soon, specialty shops started selling cabbage heads specifically chosen for rolling. Modern chefs are putting their own spin on Eva's creation. Korean fusion cabbage rolls sell for $28 at trendy Manhattan restaurants. But old-timers say nothing beats the original technique that Eva shared all those years ago. Picture our next recipe as the dish that turned a simple pot pie into something so special. It had its own fan club in 3 different states. Sunday pot pie. Ever hear how one Pennsylvania Dutch recipe became a legend in 1933? Meet Sarah Hirschberger, whose pot pie wasn't just dinner, it was kitchen magic. Her crust had a texture so perfect, women would trade prized recipes just to learn her technique. The secret? A special way of rolling the dough that created layers as delicate as spring clouds. Word spread beyond her small Lancaster County town when a traveling salesman tasted her pot pie and couldn't stop talking about it. Soon, Sunday gatherings revolved around Sarah's kitchen. Pot pie Sundays, they called them, with families bringing their own bowls just to take some home. Now here's something remarkable. That same recipe is bringing comfort food lovers to tears at urban restaurants. At $26 a serving, chefs call it artisanal Pennsylvania pot pie, but it's Sarah's technique they're trying to match. A few blocks down from Sarah's kitchen, another cook was turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary. Liver and onions deluxe. In the heart of the Depression, butcher Tom Bradley's wife Martha discovered something incredible. A special soaking method transformed humble liver into what customers swore was premium steak. Her secret blend of milk and herbs had skeptics becoming believers after just one bite. The technique spread through butcher shops like wildfire. Ask for Martha's cut became code for liver prepared her special way. Even children who claimed to hate liver would clean their plates, asking for seconds of what their parents cleverly called special steak. Fast forward to today, and this forgotten recipe is making waves in the health food world. High-end restaurants are serving heritage liver for $32 a plate, touting its iron-rich properties. But old-timers know it's really Martha's Depression-era magic at work. The next dish on our list had such a royal appearance, it earned its name from the crown it wore, crown roast of lamb. The star of 1930s dinner parties wasn't just a roast, it was edible art. In Boston's finest butcher shop, master butcher Frank Sullivan created what newspapers called the crown jewel of Sunday dinners. His preparation method turned ordinary lamb into a centerpiece so stunning, hostesses would plan entire parties around its presentation. By 1935, every special occasion demanded Frank's crown roast. He'd shape each one by hand, charging 85 cents for his artistry. The Sullivan Special became such a status symbol that engagement parties weren't official without one gracing the table. His technique spread to butcher shops across New England. Today, that same preparation method has top restaurants charging $65 a plate. Celebrity chefs claim to have reinvented it, but the technique hasn't changed since Frank first showed it to his apprentices. Deep in New England, another Sunday tradition was simmering, one that would change how America thought about beans. Sunday bean pot. In 1932, Boston, Mrs. Eleanor Wright's bean pot wasn't just cookware, it was a neighborhood legend. Her secret seasoning blend turned simple navy beans into what church suppers called Boston's best. The magic happened during the overnight soak, when she'd add her special mix of herbs that took 3 generations to perfect. Her recipe became so famous the local church started Bean Supper Saturdays. For just 15 cents, you got a bowl of beans that tasted better than meat. Women would bring their own pots to her kitchen, hoping to absorb some of her wisdom. "It's all in the timing," she'd say, never revealing her complete secret. Here's the incredible part. Modern plant-based restaurants are serving Eleanor's recipe at $22 a bowl. They call it Heritage Boston Beans, but old-timers recognize that distinct flavor from the church suppers of their youth. When it comes to transforming simple ingredients into something magical, our next recipe took chicken to new heights. Chicken fricassee. Back in 1936, Marie Dubois changed how Philadelphia thought about chicken. Working in her modest kitchen, she turned a basic chicken dinner into something so tasty her neighbors would drift over just when it was time to eat. "It's all in the sauce," she'd say, stirring a pot that smelled better than any fancy restaurant. What made it special wasn't fancy ingredients, it was her grandmother's trick from the old country. She'd cook the chicken just right, not too fast or slow, then work her magic with the gravy. Women from 3 blocks over would watch her cook, trying to learn her secret timing. "Add the flour now," she'd say, "but the milk doesn't go in till you see tiny bubbles at the edge of the pan." The recipe spread through the city like a happy secret. Local grocers started calling certain cuts of chicken fricassee ready just because so many people wanted to try Marie's recipe. By 1937, her dish was so popular that even the big downtown restaurants tried to copy it. Today, that same recipe is making people fall in love with comfort food all over again. Fine restaurants are serving it for $36 a plate, calling it classic French-American cuisine. But old-timers say nothing beats the way Marie made it in her own kitchen. Just down the road in Pennsylvania Dutch country, another cook was working her own kind of magic. Ham loaf supreme. Emma Miller never let anything go to waste, and in 1934, she turned that philosophy into what became known as Sunday's finest. Her ham loaf wasn't just a way to use leftovers, it was so good that people started saving their ham scraps on purpose just to make it. The magic was in her glaze, sweet but not too sweet, with a shine that made every slice look like it came from a magazine cover. Women would gather in her kitchen watching as she mixed, patted, and glazed. 3 brushings, she'd explain, and always let the first layer sink in before you add the next. The recipe took over every community cookbook in 5 counties. Local butchers had noticed so many people asking for ground ham that they created special Miller's Mix packages. Even fancy events started serving what everyone just called Emma's Supreme. Now, modern restaurants are rediscovering Emma's smart cooking. They call it sustainable cuisine and charge $28 a plate. Food waste experts praise how it uses every scrap of ham, but old-timers just smile. They've known this secret all along. You won't believe what comes next. A dish that turned simple corn and beans into something that had even meat lovers asking for seconds. Sunday night succotash. In 1932, when gardens meant survival, American families rediscovered a dish that Native Americans had enjoyed for centuries. Mrs. Sarah Thompson from Virginia learned the original recipe from her grandmother, who got it from local Native American cooks. Her seasoning trick? She'd save corn cobs after cutting off the kernels, using them to make a rich broth that made everything taste better. During the Victory Garden movement, Sarah's recipe spread faster than backyard tomatoes. Neighbors traded tips over garden fences. Add the lima beans last, they'd say, and only cook them until they turn bright green. Her version was so good, even kids who hated vegetables would ask for more. The dish became such a hit that community gardens started planning their plots around it. Thompson's Mix, they called it, the perfect balance of corn, beans, and Sarah's special seasonings. Women would trade their best garden spots just to be near her plot and learn her growing secrets. These days, farm-to-table restaurants are bringing back Sarah's recipe. They're charging $24 a plate for what they call heritage succotash, but it's still those same simple ingredients, cooked with respect for the old ways. From classic pot roast to apple brown Betty, these recipes tell an amazing story of American creativity in the kitchen. They weren't just meals, they were clever solutions that brought families together during the hardest times. Simple ingredients, smart techniques, and a dash of ingenuity created dishes so good they're still impressing people today. What fascinates me most? These recipes are making a comeback right when we need them. Modern chefs are charging top dollar for what used to be humble family meals. That $65 crown roast, it's just grandma's special technique in fancy clothes. And those 32 stuffed peppers? They're still using Maria's clever rice stretching method from 1931. These aren't just recipes, they're pieces of American history that prove good food doesn't need fancy ingredients. Our grandparents knew that a perfect pot roast or a well-made casserole could turn any table into a gathering place. If you've got a family recipe that helped your ancestors through tough times, share it in the comments below. Every recipe has a story, and every story deserves to be remembered. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're bringing back more forgotten recipes every week, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming up next.